The office market, I think we could see 40% declines in prices from peak, whereas single family, you might see 5%. I think that's still an incredible outcome for the single family market compared just looking at the outrageous increases in prices since COVID. I don't think that's even a pullback. I would just say that's a balancing out.
We know the residential housing market, really, it's something that's non-discretionary on a human need basis. Everyone needs to live somewhere, and they will either own, rent, or be homeless. So you talked about some of those affordability challenges before. The lower the homeownership rate gets, the more renters you have. So long-term, we will have some demand baseline for both multifamily and properties in the 1 to 4 unit space, of course. But the same thing cannot be said about some of these other commercial sectors, especially the troubled office sector space, where you have more and more abandoned buildings downtown, and a lot of these office buildings cannot be easily converted from offices to residential units. So why don't you talk to us about some of those other troubled commercial sectors, starting with office?
Office is in a apocalypse. I think that this is far, far worse than 2008 and far, far worse than 2001, because 2008 and 2001, they were liquidity crisis. They were short-term demand crises. This is a long-term demand crisis because I read very important documents from companies that are in the key swiping business. You know, when you enter an office in a downtown core, you're swiping your card. And so those companies actually have phenomenal day-by-day data of how many people are actually going into offices today. It's been more than a year since companies started calling back people to the office. And I think that by now, every company, whether they're forcing 5 days back to the office or 4 days or 3 days or 2 days, everyone's sort of put their line in the sand, and we're at the point where this is what offices look like going forward. And if I'm right, and this is what it looks like going forward, it is simply catastrophic for the office market in the United States, because we're still seeing key swipes at 50 to 60% of the people that used to swipe in before COVID. And that number is staggeringly low. And if this is what it settles at, some companies at 2 days, some 3, some 4, I think we're in for a world of pain for the office market. There's a lot of people that in these podcasts basically will often say something like, no, the office stuff will get converted into residential. Now, I have news for you. Only 3% of office buildings in downtown cores have the floor plate necessary for residential conversion. Why? Because residential conversion by law requires that every single room have a window. So what is happening is most of the time you basically can only convert the buildings on the square footage on the edge of a building, but that central core then becomes worthless. And if you don't have a use for it, then you still have to buy that office building to convert it, and you have to buy it at a reasonable price. The math doesn't work. I mean, you'd need to see office values down 80% for somebody who's converting to multifamily to say, fine, I'll just leave the 60% in the middle empty and I'll just convert the size. So 80% declines in value are needed for that kind of conversion to happen. So we are about to see a 10-year problem in the office sector, and it's also dragging down all of the other assets in the downtown core. So we just saw a $727 million default on 2 hotels in San Francisco. We saw a $558 million mall default also in San Francisco. We're seeing defaults across the board in New York, Boston, Seattle, San Diego, Miami, sort of heavy markets where these challenges are happening. And it's happening in a very, very slow way, Keith. And the reason for that is the office market, their average lease is, 5 years long. Some leases are 10 years long. And a lot of these companies haven't gone out of business. So that if the company is in the lease, they're continuing to pay even though the office is empty. But the moment that lease comes up for renewal, either the company doesn't renew it or they renew maybe half the space. And so we already know that this is an incredible debacle, but it doesn't seem like it at any given point of time because it's happening in a very slow motion way.
You can watch this one next.